Welcome to Start Local, where we talk with business owners, leaders of nonprofits, and other members of our community focused on doing business in and around Chester County, Pennsylvania. Each episode will provide insight into the local business scene and tell you about opportunities to connect with and support businesses and nonprofits in your local area.
The Southern Chester County Chamber of Commerce promotes trade, commerce, industry, and sustainable economic development while supporting a diverse and growing marketplace. The Chamber is proud to partner with the Start Local podcast to raise the profile of businesses and nonprofits throughout Chester County. Learn more about the Chamber at sccc.com. That's sccc.com.
Hey, welcome to the Start Local podcast. I am Liam Dempsey. I'm here again with Eric Goodmanson. Eric, greetings and salutations.
Greetings and salutations back to you, my friend Liam. How are you today?
I am super fantastic good. Folks, it doesn't happen very often, but since nobody can see what we're wearing, I just wanted to flag up that I am wearing a tie. I have a tie on for the first time ever recording this podcast. And
that may be the first time I've ever seen you in a tie, period.
No.
Not just for this podcast.
No,
I don't know.
A tie?
It doesn't
Didn't I wear
happen
one
often.
to Sweet Charity when we saw each other earlier this month at the Chester County Community Foundation's fantastic event?
That's right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, it's just when I think of Liam, I don't think of tie. That's not your normal business uniform, that's for sure.
Well, that means I'm doing it right. If I'm doing it right. All right. Folks, we are really pleased to welcome Dave Mattock to the show today. Dave is the owner of Mattock School of Music and frankly, so much more. Dave's a working musician, an actual working musician, and he calls Kennett Square home. And as we'll soon hear over the course of the conversation, Dave is a leader in the music and performing art scene across the southern end of Chester County. Welcome, Dave.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Dave, it's a pleasure to see you here today. And even if you're not wearing a tie, I think we'll let it pass because you and I are non-ties to get together in solidarity.
Dave, as we opened, you're a working musician, and that absolutely amazes me because I can't play any instrument. I can't even clap along consistently with the tune. So that just impresses the heck out of me. But let's start with this. What instruments do you actually play professionally versus other instruments you might play for, just practice or hanging out with friends and the like? What are your tools of choice, if you will?
Sure. So I'm a pianist by trade. That's what I do. That's what I'm trained in. I also specialize in playing Hammond organ there's a kind of a niche subgenre in the jazz world called, Hammond organ jazz. And so I do that as well. So those are the only two things I play professionally. As far as other stuff, I occasionally will sit down at a drum set and have some fun and bang away at things, but I would never let anyone hear me do that publicly.
We know that you have a music school, the Mattock School of Music, and your school is in Chadsford. What instruments and skills can aspiring musicians learn at your school? And I also want to hear the story of moving to your current location on Kennett Pike in Chadsford, because I hear there's some perseverance involved.
Sure. So basically, if you can think of it, it's not a really weird instrument and off the beaten path, and then we teach it all the strings, all the woodwinds, all the brass, piano, guitar, bass, drums. We also teach audio engineering. We teach, we have ensembles. We have basically all the different things you would want if you're trying to learn how to play music as either professional or as an amateur. So the backstory to coming to our new location, our relatively new location, I mean, we've been there for 5 years now, but was that if I go all the way back, I had originally moved to this area specifically to open a music school back in 2011. My wife and I decided to leave Philadelphia specifically to open up a music school. We bought our house with the idea that we would have the house has a large in-law suite attached to it, and we planned on renovating that right when we got out here. So that's basically what happened. We started out by moving here. I started teaching private lessons as soon as I could. I had all of 4 students. That seemed like a big success at the time. About a year into it, I realized that I would need to add and expand, and I brought in a friend of mine to teach guitar. And at that point, I also did a renovation on the in-law suite to add an extra room. That room allowed me to continue to expand over the course of about 6 more years. And at one point, we had about 90 students, and I had 7 or 8 teachers that were teaching at my house, basically. And at that point, I had then had 1 kid, and I had a second on the way, and I realized that my house was no longer adequate to sustain such a business, and we started looking for a new space. After looking around all of the kind of Kennett, Chadds Ford area, we landed on a house that is right across from the Mendenhall Inn that was zoned as a commercial space. And I'm getting ahead of myself. We purchased it in 2017. And that is the beginning of the rest of the story that you're probably alluding to. To put it succinctly, it took us 5 years to get that building open. From getting the renovation started, to getting the permitting, to going through state permitting, to reevaluating how we were going to finance the whole thing. And then at some point, finding out that there was a global pandemic that was going to land on us. On top of all of that, we didn't open until the summer of 21. So it was about a 5-year span between purchase and actually moving in and opening it.
Wow, perseverance may be not even the right word. We'd have to probably use some expletives, I suspect. But that's a difficult journey, and I'm glad your business was able to stay open at least during that time, working out of your own home. I suspect, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And during that time, first there was, we sustained the business for those few years before the pandemic. We kept working on what we were doing here while we were also working on that space. But during the pandemic, we were able to make a very, very quick shift into virtual lessons. And not every school was able to do that, but I had some really, really great teachers working for me at the time, and they made that transition quickly. I made that transition quickly, and we actually managed to grow over the course of the pandemic and add students rather than lose them. Some of that is just the natural aspect that people were looking for lessons, and some of it, I credit a little bit just to the great teachers I have and how they were able to, just keep building upon things and giving kids an opportunity to keep learning. So when we opened the doors in 21 at the new space, we'd actually gotten bigger than before the pandemic happened.
That's amazing. I just love that. I love that. So we understand that being a successful working musician probably is as much about business as being a skilled pianist or guitarist or singer or what have you. You just shared a few moments ago that when you first opened your school, you quickly realized that you needed to offer more than piano lessons. So I wonder if you can share that insight with you. What was the realization that made you say, hey, I need to get somebody to teach guitar? And perhaps you can share a few other business lessons that you've learned over since 2021 when you opened the school. What else have you learned about business that would be helpful for other folks to know about?
Sure. The first question there, that opening it up to multiple instruments, it's twofold. One is just the practical aspect of very few siblings want to play the same instrument. It's just something that I've seen over the years. And so if I have a piano student, their brother wants to play guitar. It's just kind of the nature of it. And so that is a lot to do with, personality types and things like that, and, the way families work. And so right away, I immediately had parents asking me, oh, you're a good piano teacher. Do you teach guitar? And no, I don't. So that was just a very practical application, just bring in a new teacher. And of course, I'm well connected in the music community because I've lived here for a long time. And so it was easy to find people that were looking for that kind of thing. So I was able to bring in a guitar teacher right away, and then a drum instructor, and so on and so forth. From the business point of view, when I started this whole thing, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff, from the most practical things about how to do an invoice or how to advertise something or whatever. I mean, in 2011, this was not the world that I really lived in at that point. So there's all of the basic business things that come with this. Is a very, very different world than being a gigging musician per se, or a college professor, which is what I was before this. So that was a big part of it. As I'm going on and I'm thinking about all the different things, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned over the years is that, at first, the business requires that I wear every hat, many, many hats. There's so many things that I have to do and I had to do to get this business off the ground, whether it was, like I said, invoicing, or just communication with parents, or mowing the lawn outside of the studio, or, fixing a guitar that broke overnight, whatever it is. There's a million things for me to do. But my most recent kind of challenge is kind of getting past that and allowing myself to let other people in, and people with other expertise help me with some of these things, so I don't get so bogged down in what I'm doing.
One of those things your school does is a mentorship program. And that's something that I think doesn't come often with somebody who teaches music lessons. And so in our conversations before we hit the record button, you spoke about your focus on helping young people see the many avenues open to those who want to be working musicians beyond the performing artist star. Tell us more about your mentorship program, because that's just fascinating to me, because I'm very much a music consumer. I love to buy albums. I love to go to shows. But the thought of making money in the music world seems like it's very, very difficult and be a hard walk to follow. So I'm curious, how you mentor people.
Sure. The beginning of all this comes from whenever I was still teaching at a community college, and I was asked to offer a business class, a music business class, which was a really eye-opening experience for me, because it allowed me to kind of just think deeply about what it was that I'd already done in my own life and what I'd seen around me, to see what we would call successful musicians. Whenever we think about success in the music industry, a lot of times people who are outside of it, they think about fame, basically. They think about fame, or they think about stability and, education. And that is often the only view that many of us have about what it means to be a capable musician, or someone who has made it in the industry. I always used to ask my students, like, what is the definition of making it to you? And so that has always kind of lingered in my mind. And whenever we started teaching more and more, and my students started to get older, I started with a lot of younger students. And then as they were getting older, some of them started to express interest in the idea of being a musician. And I found that right away, they were very hung up on those two exact things. They either have to be famous or they have to get into education. And for the most part, none of them either wanted to or had any idea how to do either of those things. But the reality is that I know hundreds of musicians who make a very, very comfortable living wage, what we call kind of blue-collar musicians. And we want to make sure that our students understand that those options are out there for them. And the first thing is we have to expose them to those options. We have to let them know what they are. And that's not just like telling them, but also firsthand, giving them opportunities to talk to, work with, work beside people who work in other places in the industry, and then giving them real-time experience with it. It's like if someone says, oh, I really loved that, walking, hanging out with that piano tuner that one day. Okay, well, let's find you a way to get an apprenticeship with that piano tuner. I love working in the recording industry. Okay, let's get you an internship at a recording studio. So acting as that kind of conduit for both the students and also for the parents, who oftentimes are very, very nervous about their kids getting into this world because they don't know either. And they're scared, and they're looking out for their kids, and they want to make sure that they do the right thing. And so we're trying to provide them with the information that this is a real thing, that this is something a kid can do.
Dave, you still play 70 to 100 gigs a year, and by my math, that's about 6 to 8 shows or performances a month. So there's two questions here. First, especially this one's for Eric. Where and when can we see you perform? He loves to go out and watch live music. So where and when, please, or be specific. And I guess the bigger question really is, You're trained, professionally trained. You've been to school for it. I can't imagine how many hundreds, if not thousands of gigs you've played over the last 20, 30 years. What does playing to a crowd still hold for you some 20, 25 years into your career? What excites you about getting up there?
I'll answer that first, because that one, whenever I think about that, it kind of stumps me too. It's like, how does this continue to work after all this time? It doesn't get old. I still love doing it. I might love it more because, after all those years, every gig, every year that goes by, everything that happens, I get more entrenched in it, better at it. I enjoy it more rather than the opposite. It just doesn't ever kind of die off. I mean, I play jazz, and jazz is all about improvisation and creating something new at all times. So it's inspiring. I work with great people, and I get to be around them, and they inspire me to play more, and vice versa. And so it just continues to go on and on and on like that. And I was thinking about this before we started. 25 years ago, one of my piano teachers told me that, and this has always stuck with me for that whole time. He said, the gig that you're on is the most important one. Because gigs can be anything from the worst, most awful background thing there, or a terrible bar or whatever. And there's all these or it could be something where you're on the stage in front of 5,000 people and it's amazing. And all those things, those factors kind of weigh on you whenever you're playing. But what he was saying is it doesn't really matter, because in the end, you're lucky enough to get to do this. And the worst gig is still the best gig you're ever going to have. So it's important. I've tried to live by that my whole life and try to keep that going and, that mentality happening. Your first question, where do I play? So I'm lucky enough to have a couple of what you might call residencies. And I love to brag about these places because I support them in the way that they support me. So the first is Slow Hand in Westchester. Excellent bar restaurant right downtown. They have, since they opened, I've been performing there monthly on the first Friday. So you can come hear my jazz group there on the first Friday of every month. And then the Nomad Bar in Wilmington is another place. Same thing. I have the third Friday. So I always have a jazz group of some kind, usually a trio playing there every month. I love both those places. They're the type of places that make the music industry continue and can move on because they support the music. They allow the musicians to do what they do best. They don't interfere. They just let us go. And it's a wonderful experience. So both of those are great. I play regularly there. I also play at a piano bar in Malvern called Wills and Bills. And I play there twice a month. These are all great establishments. Again, they support the musicians, but they also, they pick good musicians to play there. If I can pat myself on the back a little bit, I like to be proud of the fact that all the other musicians I see at these places are also excellent. So you go to any of them, any night of the week, and you're going to hear great music.
Well, in addition to everything else you do, you're also a recording artist. You have 4 full-length jazz albums, which you released under your own name. You've also played on dozens of recordings as a sideman. You even have composition credits for TV. Knucklebox is your latest release, I read. Knucklebox came out in 2025 in March, so about a year ago from when we were recording this. And it features you and 2 colleagues in an organ trio, Funk Tap. According to Glenn Asteria, who reviewed your album over on allaboutjazz.com, quote, the band moves as a single organism, pivoting from bebop influence lines into deep funk grooves without breaking a sweat, unquote. What were the sources of inspiration for the music on this album? Because that's a very interesting quote. That makes people want to listen.
Sure. Yeah. I love that quote. There are 2 really important factors that kind of came together for that album. The first was just my normal explorations of music. I'm always trying new things and learning new things. I practice a lot, and I'm always trying to learn about new styles of music. And at the time, I was very interested in the idea of rhythm, just kind of a blanket term. So that album is full of very, very angular, jagged, unpredictable rhythms. There's a lot of odd meter. There's a lot of circular forms. There's a lot of things that are just compositionally were on my mind. The entire album is through composed. It's supposed to go from one end to the other. I mean, each track is individual, but they reference each other if you listen carefully. And there's a lot going on there. The other side of it is that I personally, I was going through kind of a hard time. I was going through some health problems. I was having eye surgery, and I had years of eye surgeries, and I was constantly laid up where I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't perform. I couldn't play. The only thing I could really do was stay home and basically just write music. And a lot of the music is influenced by it. There's a certain kind of stress to a lot of those songs that you can hear. There's a kind of an angst to it, and some of it comes from that. It was in some of the references, the title names and everything like that are part of that whole thing. So, and then lastly, that band, and as Glenn so accurately, intuited during that, he realized just how tight that group is. I've been playing with those guys since 1999. There are thousands and thousands of hours of us playing together, and there are almost no one that would have been able to perform that music except for the 2 guys I was with. So shout out to Josh Orlando and Jason Herman, the drummer and guitar player respectively, who were on that.
Dave, I love hearing the story about the album, as stressful and sad and concerning as those experiences must have been for you, because I've listened to Knucklebox probably 5 or 6 times since I first heard about it. Thank you. And yeah, no, my pleasure. Thank you. You did all the work. I just click on play over on Bandcamp. So yeah, I hear that stress. And, I never know, is that me just bringing myself to the music or is that there? And I I really enjoyed hearing about that. Sorry it was such a tough time in your life, but I appreciate knowing that the backstory to the album. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, that's kind of how art works, right? I mean, you don't realize it even at the time. It just, you come out the other side of it and you realize how much influence it has on you. And it's okay for you to hear whatever you want in that album. If it made you feel the complete opposite, that's all right too. Whatever works for you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that about music. It is what we want it to be in the moment. And sometimes the same song means something totally different depending where we are in life and at the time of listening. So yeah, music is powerful like that. Mm-hmm. Dave, you're very active in the music and performing arts scene in the Kennett area. And I don't mean just as a teacher of music and as a performing artist. You do a lot that we'll get into in a little bit, the specifics of it, sitting on boards and organizing things and the like for the community. But the question is this: beyond economic viability for both the musicians, the blue-collar musicians, as you describe them, what value can a vibrant music scene deliver for a region?
It's so hard to put your thumb on that. Like, what does that actually mean? Because it's obviously just so important to me, but how is it important to other people? And I struggle with explaining that to people all the time. But I think the most succinct answer I can give is that the arts in general are about community, right? They bring us together. They help us, bridge the gaps between age, gender, nationality, all of the different aspects of our lives. And we can all kind of come together on those things, whether it's music or, visual arts or any other performing art. They all do that for us. And that whenever we have that kind of sense of community, everyone's life is just better. And what's the point of all of this work we're doing and all these other things if we don't have the arts, right? I mean, that's kind of what makes us human. So bringing us all together that way is what I really see. And that's what I'm trying to do is just by joining like all these different nonprofits and things like that, is to kind of normalize the idea that music is just part of life. We just have it and we should make sure that it's there and we can't ever let that go because we're lucky enough to have that ability.
You hold leadership positions with a number of local efforts and nonprofit organizations supporting the local performing arts, as Liam just alluded to. But specifically, you're the president of the board of the Kennett Flash. You're also on the board of If Not for Music, which is a Unionville-based nonprofit focused on supporting musicians and aspiring musicians. The Kennett Flash, I love going to see shows there. The sound quality is amazing. It's always a wonderful vibe in the audience and among the performers. Tell us about these organizations from your perspective.
Sure. The Kennett Flash is, a unique space. I mean, as a performing musician, I know what they're all like. There aren't a lot that sound as good as it does. It is a 100-seat listening room. The focal point is the music and listening to the music. It's not a restaurant. It's not a bar. It's not anything other than a place to listen to music. And that's what makes it so special because those are hard to find and they're very hard to sustain. Believe me, I've been on that board since 2017. It is a lot of work to keep that place running. But it's an amazing space. It's a great jumping off point for up and coming musicians. It's a great place for musicians who are maybe on the back end of their careers to continue to sustain themselves as they're, maybe, the former third guitar player from, you name it, a famous band or something like that. Like, where do they perform these days? So places like this, it's a great place for kids to see music. It's a great place for us to be able to access it in a way that like maybe you can't if you live outside of an urban area. So the Kennett Flash is a wonderful thing for the Kennett community. And I hope that, we can spread the word about that more.
And how about If Not for Music?
Sure. That's a newer organization that I'm a part of now, for me at least. And my association with them came specifically because I had some students who were just going through hard times in their lives and were no longer able to continue their lessons just financially. And that's as simple as that. And I was desperate to find a way to get them, to allow them to keep them on and make sure that they can continue to take lessons. And so I was just digging around and looking for something. And I stumbled across this group and they are doing wonderful things with raising money for kids to take lessons, to have access to music, to for the musicians who are in that transition period between amateur and professional, for giving them opportunities to perform in places, things like that. And they do a great job with it, and they're continuing to, and they're starting to grow. And it's just a wonderful organization in that way.
Let's swing back around to your career here a moment. And you're a gigging musician, as you said. You have the school. Tell us about what your revenue streams really. So, you've talked about mentoring students and to be able to have a fulfilling career in music beyond what we see in the headlines. How are you paying your bills? Where does all the money come from? How does that all work? How do you tie that all together in a way that pays the bills and supports your family?
Yeah, that's this is the conversation I have with my students all the time. I mean, I'm fortunately in a place in my life now where I have the history and the built up kind of connections and just the business that I can able to sustain myself with a little bit less stress than I used to. Most of my life today is the music school. That's what I do. I teach a lot. I still have about 30 students myself. The school has many, many students. And so that creates the income that I need to be able to have my family and do the things that I do in my life. I also gig and I make money at that, of course. That's part of it. And there's a little bit of kind of the random stuff of being a musician. We always have so many different small things that come in. I might end up doing an audio engineering gig, or I might do some live sound for somebody, or I might get called to write a jingle for a commercial or something like that. There's still a lot of that kind of stuff going on in my life. Formerly, before I had kind of steadied things and leveled things off with the music school, I spent a lot of time running around being a college professor, an adjunct professor at multiple schools. At one point, I was at 3 different colleges. I was playing in a cover band. I was gigging in whatever random place I could find. I was doing, small recordings and the same thing. I acted as a booking agent for a little while. There was some, there's some things with just from writing. There's some royalties income that comes through like from that kind of stuff. So, it kind of changes and evolves over the years, but currently it's mostly the school.
So I'm curious about now that you have this, I'll call steady income, right? Is that when we're working for ourselves, is income ever really steady?
Sure.
Yes, generally is sometimes, yeah. But this write a jingle, come do some sound, help out, I don't know, with a band that you don't normally play with. Is that kind of like the money's right? I really like those people. That sounds really fun, actually. Is it some of, you know what? The bathroom broke last week. We've got that heaters going. I need to do some of that. Maybe I'll take this extra work. How do you decide with all these wonderful opportunities that come? How do you decide which ones to take and which ones to say, no, thank you, please?
If you're one of my students listening, the answer is yes. You always say yes. That is just what we do as gigging anything. It's just, that's the world it is. Even if you don't know how to do it, just say yes, figure it out along the way. But the reality is today I have a lot more to balance. I have my kids' lives. I have to be there for lacrosse practice. I have to, make sure that I'm not working constantly. And then there's also the stress of some of these things. I mean, that work can be hard. You get a call to sub in for a band and it can be 3 hours of actual work, but it could be 12 hours of prep work, learning new material, or it could be going out and researching how to use a particular piece of technology that you've never used before so that you can, get the job done. So there's all these like other factors that you have to add in and see if you can actually fit them in. And there's a lot to that. There's a lot that goes into it. And, you want to say yes to things and you want to stay connected to the community, the arts community, and be a part of things, but you also want to not, completely stress yourself out all the time. And travel is a big part of it. I think about that a lot. I used to travel a lot more than I do today. I'm not as likely to drive 2, 3, 4 hours at a time for a gig, for anything as much as I used to. Whereas, today I tend to stay home for the most part, but I used to drive a lot. So those are also things that kind of go into it all.
Something that a lot of people may not realize is that Kennett has a jazz and funk festival. Tell us about the origin story of that festival and what artists and musicians are you most excited to see there in 2026?
Sure. 5 years ago, I got a call from a drummer that I did not know saying, basically, I've got this idea for a kind of like, he called it a jazz festival, but it was mostly just an opportunity for the local jazz musicians to get together and play all on the same day so that we could kind of socialize and just kind of, be around each other and whatnot. And that was at Kennett Brewing Company, which unfortunately is gone now. But that first year of the festival, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention his name. It's Jeff Piscitello is the drummer, and he's the founder of the Jazz Festival originally. And he's still with the group, and he still runs the whole organization. That first festival was, I think, 8 bands consecutively on the stage of the Kennett Brewing Company. And it was a huge success, at least in our minds. It has continued to grow over the years. So we're now in our 5th year. We are now utilizing multiple venues. We're going to be in the Kennett Flash. We're going to be in the library, the Kennett Library. And there's going to be an additional day at the Creamery. The big thing that I'm excited about this year, rather than any particular performer, is that on the one hand, we've gotten rid of having like a so-called headliner act, like a bigger act. We were always striving to get some kind of big name in. And this year we decided we didn't want to do that anymore. We really wanted to go back to the roots of the festival, which was to only utilize local musicians and to really showcase them because they're so amazing. You don't have to be famous to be a great musician. So we wanted to make sure that we were true to that original idea. And so all of our musicians are local and they're all just wonderful and fantastic. The other side of it is the Sunday, the 3rd day of the festival, which is going to be at the Creamery, is exclusively up-and-coming artists who haven't quite made it yet, as even within the local scene. They're mostly college kids or just post-college, and they're just getting themselves going. So it's kind of like a showcase for them. So it's really exciting to be able to get them off the ground, because a lot of jazz festivals are so exclusive. There's no access point for new musicians to play at them, and they're great. They're fantastic musicians, and they're ready to perform and play. And so we're doing a 3rd day specifically just for those types of acts.
I spent probably an hour on the festival's website listening to the 30 and 40-second clips of all the different performers. And I even got to the point where I was starting to map out I would go from this theater to go over to there. Can I make it back in time? And I'm really looking forward to getting there this year. I've never been, so I'm super excited. And folks out there in listener land, we'll be sure to include the links to all of these festivals and things that Dave's mentioning over on startlocal.co over on the show notes page. And just one last note, the Jazz Fest tickets are really economic. They're very cost effective. Don't hold me to this, but it was something like $25 for a day or $40 for the weekend for I don't know, it looks like about 8 or 9 hours worth of music. I would love to say something about that if I can.
Go, please do. We are so excited about that. And there are 2 things that help with that. One is not having a huge main headliner helps reduce some costs, and that helps a little bit. But the second part is If Not For Music has stepped in and has acted as an intermediary to help us raise funds for the festival. They were able to raise money to lower the price because their whole goal is to give access to kids to allow them to be at these shows or to perform at these shows in some capacity or another. And so by meeting their mission statement, we were actually able to lower the cost of the festival so that it's more accessible for more people. We want to see families there. We don't want it to be an exclusive thing just for, adults only. It's like now, instead of, just a couple going, now maybe a whole family can come to this thing. So we're really excited about that. And I want to mention that all the proceeds from the festival, because we've already managed to pay for all of the costs and the performers are taken care of and they're all paid for, all of the proceeds will now go back to If Not For Music, and it will go back into their budget for next year.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing. You're never too old to learn an instrument. We expect that most of our listeners are well beyond the age, currently are well beyond the age of whatever age you started to play piano. But I wonder, you've taught music for a long time. You've studied it even longer. You've been playing it even longer than that. Is the old adage that it's never too late really true? Can folks as old as me really play an instrument?
Yes, 100%. You can do this. It just takes time. It's like anything else. And do our minds learn the same way as they did whenever we were kids? No. I mean, they're just, we are built differently than a 7 or 8 year old, right? But what we do have now is we have knowledge and wisdom, and it allows us to learn faster at this age in many ways. But the biggest constraint for anybody learning an instrument later on is just time. You don't have the time to devote to it that, say, a 14 or 15-year-old who is really into it. They might have 2 or 3 hours in their life every day where they can set aside. And the reality is most adults can't. And that's where they usually stumble, is they don't have the time to do it and they can't devote enough time to it. Speaking from experience, I actually didn't start not as an adult, but not at a young age either. I started whenever I was 15. And that's way past the age whenever you're supposedly able to learn piano, right? And I spent years playing catch up to my peers, and that's the reality of what it was. In college, at times, was very frustrating for me whenever I was like trying to like keep up with kids who had been playing since they were 4 years old and this and that. But the reality is that I did learn it. I did figure out how to play piano, and it took a lot of hours. And now I'm pretty good at it. So. So if I can do it at 15, anybody can do it at any age. And, at this point, I have a lot of adult students, a lot of people, they get to that point where their kids are maybe leaving for college or something like that, or they're in retirement and they want to learn an instrument. And whether they're going to become a great pianist or not is beside the point. It's like, do they get the personal joy out of it? And do they find something in it that helps them, gives them, something new and valuable in their lives?
You're clearly a professionally trained and educated jazz pianist. How does that focus on formal music education in the backdrop of what you just described, of really starting at age 15 to learn the piano and all that, influence your teaching style with your current students, assuming your current students are all different age groups? So how do you relate to them? How does that impact your teaching style?
Sure. The biggest thing about being a so-called trained musician, whatever that actually means, but let's say just with this college education, is that I've been exposed to things that I wouldn't necessarily have found on my own, things that I wouldn't have ever found. I never would have gotten to those places. So, I don't know that I would have studied Bach if I hadn't gone to college. Right. And I don't know that I would have learned about certain things. And I'm able to build upon the shoulders of the previous hundreds and hundreds of years of educators and utilize what they already figured out and then pass that down to my students. I don't want to reinvent the wheel constantly. Not that it's any knock on a musician who doesn't have that education. There's a lot to be said for people who are self-taught. But from my point of view, this is what it gives me, and what it gives my students is access to more than what your normal person might find on their own.
Speaking of things that people might find on their own, it's interesting to me to hear jazz come through in pop culture in different ways. To a lot of people, their first introduction to jazz might have been the old Peanuts cartoon. Recently it was the Showtime series Homeland. Jazz was featured very, very prominently in that show throughout all the seasons. How do you find jazz hitting people through pop culture these days?
I think that it's one of the best times in history for jazz, in the sense that because it's so accessible and there's such the financial barriers have gone down so much, it really is, it's more accessible for students. If you have an ear for it and you're interested, you can get it now. You can find it. You can live in a rural place that doesn't necessarily, maybe promote music directly to you, then you can get to it. There are almost no barriers anymore, which is wonderful. And so it shows up in all kinds of places that it wouldn't have before. A lot of the kind of gatekeepers of the past are gone, for better or worse. And there's a whole conversation around that going on. But right now, at least we have access to those things, which is wonderful.
So I'm going to invite our listeners to pull their pen and their paper out, at least pull up an empty screen on their computer and get their keyboard ready. I'm going to ask Dave, what musician, band, or artist really thrills you these days? And please feel free to share a few.
A few.
And upset
as many as you want.
And upset lots of other performers you're not going to mention.
Oh,
but that's
no,
okay.
Right? I mean, it's just, so I'm going to leave out anybody that I personally know, because there's just too many of them and I don't want to mess anything up. And really this question is like impossible. Whenever I go through my particular, my weekly pattern of music, it's constant. I'm always listening to things. So I might have maybe more than you want to hear, but I've got a kind of a short list here. My favorite piano players, I'm a pianist first and foremost, and I love, and I will always continue to love the work of Brad Mehldau, Jason Lindner, Mike Ladon, John Medeski. These are just wonderful musicians that are currently still putting out music. They've been doing this for decades, and it's just like, it seems like endless, the amount of stuff they can do. On a more kind of modern vibe, or a little bit more mainstream vibe, I should say, I'm a big fan of Hiatus Coyote, which is a great band out of, I think, New Zealand is where they're from. Lionel Loecki, who is an African guitar player. Esperanza Spalding, the great bass player, is somebody that I check out a lot. So these are all cool things. There's a DC, I don't even know what to call him, vocalist, for lack of a better term, because he's a spoken word hip hop singer named Kukoe that I listen to a lot. That's really amazing. So these are some of the things I do. And then kind of on the more world and classical side, you should check out Miho Hazama is a great composer out of Japan. Alarmal Sound is my favorite like modern classical group that I listen to. I check them out for everything they do. They're just absurdly talented, just crazy stuff that they're doing. I think I could stop there. That's probably enough for now.
I was going to say, Liam's fingers, I think, are getting a little bit cramped from like typing all the show notes. So
I'll send it all to you later. You got to have it all. But
I prepare the list. Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you for that. Yeah, I could have just had you keep going. I love hearing.
I've got 100
people
more.
Share the music that they're listening to because it's like I've never heard of them. Oh, look, this is great.
Yeah.
Adding everything to my list.
Yeah, please do.
You.
Well, maybe a shorter list for you, but equally potentially offensive to our local listeners. Where do you go locally to see live music? I'm curious what you think are venues are super cool and bringing exciting acts. I'll tell you, I've even seen some really amazing jazz performances in Westchester at Spence's Cafe where they have jazz nights going on there. So I feel like it's probably in a lot more places than people take notice of. So where do you like to go?
Sure, and I got to admit, I'm not a good person to answer this question because for all the time I can spend listening to music while I'm at home, I don't have a lot of free time to go see shows. I'm either performing or trying to take a night off from performing. So I don't go out a whole lot. But when I do, I utilize a great website called phillyjazzscene.com. This group has just nailed it with finding all the local jazz music, where they're playing, because those places are completely underground and you're never going to find them on your own. And it's always hip and upcoming and new stuff, and it's amazing. So that's what I utilize to find things. And I go on there and I just go looking for whatever's playing and just find it. And they have really managed to cover a ton of ground in all of the Philadelphia and area around Philadelphia. So that's just a great utilization. And that's one of my, it's also run by local musicians who are, active performers themselves. And so there's just like there's a purity to it that I love. So I use that to get around to different places. And then personally, I'm so steeped in the jazz community and in the rock community and funk and all that when I go out to see stuff, I don't go to see any of that anymore. I almost always go to see classical music. So I'm either going to go, maybe see the Brandywine Symphony, or I'm going to go to the Kimmel Center and I'm going to see the Philadelphia Orchestra. And that's a regular thing. And you talk about an inspiring place to realize like kind of a testament to what the arts community can become at times. It's just a wonderful, wonderful place to go.
And since you didn't do it, I have to give you your own plug to go see you at Slow Hand Nomad or Wills and Bills. So there you go.
Thank you.
Speaking of new places and exciting places and the jazz scene in Philadelphia, there is a new jazz cafe in Coatesville, Andrea's Jazz Cafe. It's right there on the main drag, Lancaster Avenue, Route 30. And it's been open. Jesus, if it's been a full 2 weeks, a full fortnight, I'd be surprised. And so, Dave, I don't expect you to have been there already, particularly in light of the fact what you just shared. You tend not to get out and about for obvious reasons that you shared here. But the question I'm going to ask still stands, and I still think I want you to address it. What is a new venue, a new jazz venue, a jazz club opening in our little corner of the world right here in Chester County? It's not in Philly. It's right here for us in our own neighborhood. What does that say about the music scene in Chester County?
It's only a good thing. That's what we need to see. For too long, we've had to rely on, these urban centers for so much of the music community. And not that there hasn't been venues outside of the city, but we've seen a decline in them. I mean, the pandemic was brutal for places outside of Philly and New York and DC. I mean, it just crushed them. And we've lost a lot of great venues. So to see a new venue coming up, it's just a great thing. And one venue after another rising up like that allows the whole kind of microeconomy of the music industry to continue to thrive, because musicians need to have more than one place to play, because audiences need to have variety in where they see people, and the two combined, we really need to have that happening. So another jazz group, or another jazz, performance venue is just such a boon to the, the local music and arts culture.
Dave, tell us about a local business or nonprofit that more folks should know about. You've listed a lot already, but I'm curious if there's any that maybe haven't hit any of the categories we explicitly asked you about earlier.
Sure. I mean, so much of my life is spent, thinking about music and in the arts community and everything. So I want to kind of step outside of that. An important group for me in this area is Canine Partners for Life. They are a wonderful organization that's doing some great things, providing service animals for people with disabilities. I come from a family where disabilities are a major impact in our lives and something I grew up with, and it's important to us. And then, who doesn't love dogs and puppies and and the people around that and who want to be a part of that? And they do a great job with what they're doing. So I want to give them a shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. We were lucky enough to have Kristen Downey on the show from Canine Partners for Life. She was on back in September of 2024. So we'll be sure to not only link to their website, the organization itself, but we'll definitely include a link to our conversation with Kirsten. It's such a great organization down there.
Yeah, super cool. Every year, my kids, when they set up their lemonade stands, they always set aside the money for Canine Partners for Life. And it's not a lot. But just the fact that they get to do that, and then they go there and they get to see the dogs and hang out and do the whole thing, it's just great.
So you've talked about your music school so much, and the way you talk about teaching and learning your students makes me wonder, are you hiring?
I'm always hiring in some capacity or another. The nature of what I do requires a lot of people. I need a lot of different people to do a small amount of work. A teacher, I'm always in need of another piano teacher or guitar teacher or something like that. So for sure. And I'm always looking to kind of help someone. A lot of the people who work for me are, kind of in transition points between maybe college and moving on to another part of their careers. And I love giving them an opportunity to do that for a few years. So yes, I'm hiring.
How can our local community support you and all the many efforts that you have going on there?
Sure. The best thing is, both the nonprofits I work with, they always need support, whether it's spreading the word about them, could be financial, could just be donations, or just attending events and being at things. We have seen a decline in attendance across the board at almost all venues in every capacity. People kind of got out of the habit at some point, and the world has changed a little bit. We would love to just see people back out again and doing things and supporting, especially the local economy when it comes to music. Maybe go see a big show or something like that with 40,000 other people, but please go out and see music locally and support those bands. Those people are hardworking and they're just as good as anybody else you're going to see. So please just get out there and be a part of things.
Dave Mattock, jazz pianist and owner of Mattock School of Music. Where can listeners connect with you, find out where you will be performing next, and sign up to take music lessons from you and your team?
Oh, fair. So for me personally, I have my own website. It's davemattock.com. And I try to keep that updated with any performance stuff that I'm doing. And then separately, for any educational needs you'd have, please reach out to the website for that is mattockschoolofmusic.com.
And folks out there in listener land, absolutely go check out Knucklebox as an album. Pull it up on whatever your preferred platform is and give it a listen or two. It's fantastic. Dave, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, talking to you, learning about music and all the things you've been sharing. Thank you, sir.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Dave. And thank you also to my co-host, Liam Dempsey. I'm Eric Goodmanson. The Start Local podcast is published every 2 weeks. We invite you to subscribe to Start Local using your favorite podcast app or ask your smart speaker to play the Start Local podcast. You can visit the Start Local website at startlocal.co for show notes, including the many links mentioned on the show and summaries of past episodes. We hope you join us for the next episode. Thank you for listening.